I want you to imagine for a moment, what if someone you love, your niece, your little girl, vanished for just 10 minutes? 10 minutes might sound like nothing in the grand scheme of things, but in that time, your entire world can flip upside down. You're frantic, your heart races, and your mind races faster, filled with a storm of questions you don't know how to answer. And then, when she finally comes back, she looks at you with wide, haunted eyes and says something you weren't prepared for, something terrifyingly real and impossible to ignore. She says, "He took me underground." What would you do? How would you process that? Would you believe her? Or would you fear what it might mean? This is not just a story about a missing child, a fleeting disappearance, or an ordinary day turned chaotic. It's about something much deeper, something darker hiding just beneath the surface of normal life. A story that touches the core of fear and the fragile bond between innocence and danger. This is a story you're going to want to hear all the way through because the answers, the truth will shock you, but more importantly, they might change how you see the world around you. If you came here searching for answers, for that moment where everything clicks into place, stay with me because we're going to get there together. Before we dive in, I want to talk directly to you, the person watching this right now. Maybe you're a parent, an aunt, an uncle, or just someone who's ever felt that bone-deep fear of losing someone precious. Maybe you've had your own brush with mystery or danger, or maybe you just want to understand how seemingly small moments can spiral into unthinkable nightmares. Whatever brought you here, I want you to know, you're not alone in feeling shaken, confused, or desperate for the truth. And this story, this moment, will remind you of something vital. The strength it takes to face the unknown, the power of believing when no one else does, and the lengths we'll go to protect the ones we love. So let's get into it. Let me introduce you to the people at the heart of this mystery. My niece, who for a brief, terrifying time disappeared, and then returned with a story so strange, so chilling, that it's still hard to believe. And then there's me, caught between disbelief and dread, trying to make sense of what happened, trying to hold on to hope in the middle of chaos. The day started like any other. A quiet afternoon, a family gathering filled with laughter and the usual harmless chaos of kids playing, adults chatting, phones buzzing. My niece, a bright and curious little girl, was happily exploring the backyard, a place she loved. We never expected that in just 10 minutes she would be gone, like she'd vanished into thin air. The search was frantic but brief, because after those terrifying minutes she was found. But the relief we felt was quickly replaced by a deeper fear when she whispered the words that shattered the calm. "He took me underground." You're probably wondering what that means. Who took her? Where is underground? Is this some kind of fantasy born from a child's imagination, or something far more sinister? Those questions have haunted me every day since. And I promise by the time you finish watching this video you will know the answers, or at least the parts of the truth I can share. What I want you to understand from the start is that this story isn't about making you scared for the sake of it. It's about understanding the layers of fear and mystery that can exist just beneath the surface of everyday life. It's about the things we don't see, the places we don't go, and the secrets we never imagined could touch us. And it's about the courage it takes to face those dark places, both literally and figuratively. The atmosphere in this story is tense and unsettling because, let's be honest, when a child disappears, even briefly, your sense of safety shatters. You feel vulnerable in a way that's hard to describe, like a part of your soul is exposed to something you can't control. That's exactly the tone I want you to feel because it's real. I want you to feel the weight of those 10 minutes, the rush of panic, the desperate search, and the shock of what came after. As we move forward, you'll meet more characters, family members, neighbors, even strangers, each with their own role in this unfolding mystery. Some will seem helpful, others suspicious, and all will add layers to a story that's anything but straightforward. And through it all, you'll see how fragile trust can become, how appearances can deceive, and how truth is sometimes hidden in the shadows. I'm telling you this now because I want you to stay with me. You're not just a viewer, you're part of this journey. You're the one piecing together clues, feeling the tension, and waiting for the moment everything makes sense. The video you're watching is more than just a story, it's an experience. And it's going to pull you in deeper than you might expect. Now let me set the scene more vividly for you. Picture a sunny afternoon, birds chirping, the laughter of children ringing through the air. My niece was playing near an old part of the property, a spot few people paid attention to, with a small, weathered gate leading to what used to be an old cellar entrance, now mostly forgotten. Nobody really went near it anymore. But that day she wandered close. Then she was gone. The panic that followed was like a storm breaking loose, with every second stretching out endlessly. When she finally came back, eyes wide and voice trembling, she didn't just say she'd been lost, she said she'd been taken. Taken underground by someone she didn't name immediately but described in a way that sent chills down our spines. We struggled to understand what she meant. Was this a nightmare? A trick of imagination? Or a real terrifying event? That question kept me awake at night, burning in my mind. And that's what makes this story so gripping and so difficult. Because it's not just a missing child story. It's a story about the unknown lurking beneath our feet, the dangers hidden in places we overlook, and the unspoken truths children sometimes glimpse, truths adults are too afraid to face. I want you to pay close attention as this unfolds. Notice the small details, the way my niece describes her time underground, the reactions of the adults around her, the clues we found afterward. Each piece matters. And some of those pieces will shock you. By now, you're probably feeling a mix of emotions: curiosity, fear, disbelief, maybe even skepticism. That's normal. I want you to hold on to those feelings because they're part of what makes this story real and relatable. And I want you to ask yourself, what would you do if this happened to someone you love? How far would you go to uncover the truth? As you watch, you'll also see the psychological impact this event had on my niece and the whole family, how a brief moment of terror rippled through our lives, changing everything. This story isn't just about what happened underground, it's about how that experience echoes long after the event, how trauma shapes us, and how sometimes the scariest part is not what happened, but what might still be hidden. I'm going to be honest with you, there were moments when I didn't know what to believe, when the fear and confusion almost broke me. But I also found strength in unexpected places, in the courage of my niece to speak out, in the support of those who refused to ignore the signs, and in the relentless search for answers that refused to let this mystery die. And that's why you're here. Because you want to know the truth. Because you want to see how this mystery unfolds. Because somewhere inside you understand the stakes are high, not just for my family but for anyone who's ever feared the unknown. So, if you're ready, join me as we unravel the story of my niece's disappearance, her terrifying words about being taken underground, and the journey that followed, a journey filled with mystery, fear, and hope. Stick around because the truth is coming, and it's not what you might expect. But before we move forward, I want to leave you with this thought. Sometimes the darkest places are not far away or hidden deep underground, they're right here in the people and places we think we know best. And sometimes the most important truths are whispered in moments of silence, from the lips of those too young to be heard. Now get ready because what you're about to hear will challenge everything you thought you knew about safety, family, and fear. And just when you think you have it figured out, the story will twist again, leaving you questioning what's real, what's imagined, and what lies just beneath the surface. The days leading up to that terrifying afternoon seemed ordinary enough on the surface, but looking back there were subtle shifts, small things that didn't quite add up and now feel like pieces of a puzzle scattered just out of reach. My niece, Lily, was always a spirited and curious kid, full of life and energy, but lately there had been a restlessness about her that even her parents noticed. She had been asking strange questions about hidden places, secret tunnels, and stories of things buried underground, things no child her age would normally fixate on. At first, everyone brushed it off as an innocent fascination with adventure or perhaps a phase inspired by one of the many mystery books she loved. But the more she talked about the underground, the more it unsettled me, especially given the history of the old property where our family gatherings took place. A place with creaky floors, forgotten cellars, and a shadow of stories no one liked to mention. You see, this old house wasn't just a backdrop for family memories, it carried whispers of a past tangled in secrecy. Neighbors often mentioned strange noises late at night, and some of the older relatives recalled rumors from decades ago about tunnels beneath the property that had once served as part of a forgotten network, perhaps used during Prohibition or even earlier. Those rumors never seemed real to us, dismissed as local legend or superstition, but they suddenly took on a sinister weight when Lily's words echoed in my mind after her disappearance. The tension in the air was palpable. There was an undercurrent of something unseen and unspoken. Everyone at the gathering tried to keep things light to avoid dredging up old fears, but I could see the unease lurking behind the smiles, and I'm sure you know that feeling, the one where you suspect something is wrong but can't quite put your finger on it. Before that day, I had been visiting the house regularly, often alone or with Lily's parents, mostly to help manage some of the renovations that were supposed to bring the place back to life. But with every visit, I noticed more odd things. Doors that seemed to creak open on their own, misplaced objects that would turn up in strange places, and sometimes in the quietest moments, a faint echo that sounded almost like footsteps from beneath the floorboards. I chalked it up to old house quirks at first, but those sounds started to feel less accidental and more deliberate, like a message waiting to be deciphered. My conversations with Lily before the incident had revolved around her innocent curiosity, But after she disappeared, those same conversations took on a chilling new meaning. Was she sensing something we couldn't? Was she trying to warn us in her own way? As the hours passed after she was found, the adults began piecing together fragments of what might have happened, but the more they talked, the murkier the picture became. Some recalled seeing a man near the property earlier that day, someone unfamiliar, dressed in dark clothes, who vanished as quickly as he appeared. Was he connected to Lily's disappearance? Or was he just a coincidence, another red herring thrown into this bewildering mix? Others remembered a distant relative who had recently been acting strangely, showing an unusual interest in the old tunnels and the property's hidden corners. There were whispers about unresolved family disputes and old grievances that might have resurfaced, but no one wanted to believe that someone from within the family could be involved in anything sinister. These threads tangled together, forming a web of suspicion that made it impossible to know who to trust. Even Lily's own descriptions of her time underground added layers of uncertainty. Her innocent yet precise recounting of a shadowy figure who spoke in a low, calm voice was both terrifying and perplexing. Was this he real, or was he a manifestation of a child's fear? Was he a person or something else entirely? The way she described the space beneath the ground, narrow, dark, damp, filled with strange noises and an overwhelming sense of something watching her, made it clear that this was no ordinary hiding spot. But how had she gotten there, and more importantly, why? Had someone been planning this all along, waiting for a chance to lure her into the darkness? Or was it something darker, something that no one in our circle dared to acknowledge? As we wrestled with these questions, other unsettling details surfaced. Neighbors recalling unexplained power outages around the property, strange footprints near the gate to the cellar, and the sudden disappearance of a family heirloom that had been in the house for generations. Was someone trying to send a message or cover their tracks? And what about the police? Their investigation seemed to hit dead ends quickly, as if there was an invisible wall of silence and fear surrounding the entire neighborhood. This only deepened the mystery, making me wonder if what happened to Lily was part of something bigger, something that stretched beyond our family, beyond our town. And that's when the tension really started to build, when the lines between the familiar and the unknown blurred. Was this a story about a missing child, or a glimpse into a hidden world lurking beneath our feet? Was he just a man with a dark purpose, or a symbol of something more sinister, an echo of fears that have haunted humanity for centuries? You might be asking yourself right now, who could possibly be behind this? What motives would drive someone to do such a thing? Those questions are exactly why you need to stay with me. Because as the story unfolds, the suspects will multiply, the motives will grow more complicated, and the truth will become harder to grasp. I'm sharing this with you now because the answers we've uncovered so far aren't simple, and they aren't comforting. But they are real. And they have brought us face to face with the darkest corners of a mystery that refuses to stay buried. You'll meet people who seemed kind but hid secrets, friends who suddenly became strangers, and places that should have been safe but weren't. Each new detail pulls you deeper into a story that's as chilling as it is mysterious, and the more you watch, the more you'll realize just how little we understood that day. So, as you listen to Lily's words, as you watch the pieces fall into place, keep asking yourself, what would you do if someone you loved vanished, even for a moment? Who would you trust when everyone seems to have something to hide? And how far would you go to uncover a truth that no one wants to face? These questions aren't just part of the story, they are the heartbeat of this mystery. Just when I thought we were finally making progress, when every new detail seemed to bring us a step closer to understanding what really happened to Lily and the meaning behind her words, something shifted, and suddenly the path forward became tangled with shadows deeper than I could have imagined. It started with something small, almost insignificant at first, but in hindsight it was a warning sign. A key piece of evidence, the one thing that had the potential to unlock the mystery, vanished. We had found an old, weathered map tucked inside an ancient book in the attic, a map that hinted at hidden passages beneath the property. It was fragile and cryptic, but it confirmed what we'd only dared to whisper about. There was more underground than anyone had admitted. But just as I was about to show it to a trusted investigator, the map disappeared. Not misplaced, not lost, vanished. Like it had been deliberately taken out of reach. That moment hit me like a punch in the gut. It was clear someone didn't want us digging any deeper. Then came the warning. An anonymous message left on my phone, chilling in its brevity: stop looking or you'll regret it. No signature, no explanation, just that cold, final threat. I felt a knot tightening in my stomach, the kind that comes when you realize the stakes are higher than you thought. Who was behind it? Why warn me? And why now? It was no longer just about Lily's safety, it was about ours all being caught in something much bigger. And that warning wasn't empty. Soon after, I noticed a subtle shift in the people around me. Some friends and relatives who had seemed supportive suddenly grew distant, their eyes wary. A neighbor who used to wave hello started avoiding me altogether. Even the local sheriff, who had seemed genuinely interested at first, became unusually quiet, dismissing questions with vague reassurances that felt hollow. Digging deeper into Lily's story, I unearthed something I hadn't expected, a secret from the past that seemed to be at the heart of all this. Years ago, there had been a betrayal within the family, a falling out involving the property and an inheritance dispute that had left scars nobody talked about. That hidden fracture had been covered up, buried like the tunnels beneath the house, but the echoes of it were alive and dangerous. Someone from that past betrayal had returned, or maybe had never left, and was now tangled in whatever had taken Lily. The realization hit me hard. The danger wasn't just external. It was rooted in history, in people who once called themselves family, now strangers cloaked in secrets. Amid this growing storm, an unexpected ally appeared, a man named Daniel, a local historian with a reputation for uncovering buried truths. At first, his knowledge seemed like a godsend. He shared insights about the tunnels and old family disputes, guiding me through dusty records and faded photographs. But the more I trusted him, the more I sensed there was something off. Daniel's questions sometimes felt probing, almost invasive, and he seemed to know too much about things I hadn't shared. At times, his calm demeanor gave way to moments of frustration, as if he was hiding his own connection to the past. Was he helping me? Or was he part of the mystery itself? That uncertainty gnawed at me, making every interaction a test of trust. Just as the tension reached a breaking point, the biggest twist came crashing down. One evening, as I was going over notes and maps in the dim light of the old house, I found a hidden compartment in a floorboard, a place I hadn't noticed before. Inside was a worn journal, its pages filled with cryptic entries about the tunnels, a he who watched from the shadows, and a chilling plan that hinted at something unspeakable. But before I could digest what I'd found, the journal disappeared too, this time from right under my nose. Someone was watching, someone who was always one step ahead. And if they were willing to steal evidence from my own home, I knew we were in real danger. Now I'm left standing at a crossroads. Every clue I uncover seems to vanish or lead to dead ends. The people I thought I could rely on may be hiding dark secrets, and the threat lurking beneath the surface feels closer than ever. The question that haunts me, and that should haunt you too, is this: who is the real he that took Lily underground? Is it a person? Or is it something far more sinister, a shadow from the past refusing to stay buried? And what price will we have to pay to unearth the truth? Just as I was beginning to grapple with the disappearances of the map and journal, and the creeping suspicion that someone close was playing a dangerous game, a new and unexpected thread wove itself into the tangled web of this mystery. It started with my sister Lily's mother, who had been quietly bearing the weight of everything since the day her daughter vanished those 10 minutes. One evening, while I was still sifting through the fragments of clues in the old house, she called me in a voice tight with fear and confusion. She had received a message eerily similar to the one I got, an anonymous warning, but this time it was more personal. Stop asking about Lily. This is bigger than you know. The words sent a fresh wave of dread crashing over us both. Suddenly, it wasn't just me being targeted, it was the entire family. The stakes were no longer about a single child's safety but about something far more insidious that threatened to pull us all under. What made things even more complicated was the discovery of a new piece of evidence that directly contradicted everything we'd been piecing together. A neighbor, someone we had never suspected, came forward with footage from a doorbell camera that showed Lily wandering near the old cellar entrance. But what it captured next didn't fit the narrative at all. There was no shadowy figure, no stranger in dark clothes. Instead, the footage revealed a figure that looked startlingly familiar, someone from our family circle, someone who had been quietly observing the entire situation from the sidelines. This revelation shattered the fragile trust we had left and forced me to question everything I thought I knew about the people closest to me. Who was this person? Why had they been lurking near the property that day? And most importantly, what role did they play in Lily's disappearance and her terrifying claim of being taken underground? The more we dug, the more the lines between friend and foe blurred. Conversations that once felt straightforward became labyrinths of half-truths and evasive answers. Family dinners turned tense, with loaded glances and silent accusations hanging heavily in the air. Everyone seemed to be hiding something, and paranoia started to seep into every interaction. Even Daniel, the historian who had offered his help, began to act more secretive, his patience wearing thin whenever questions circled too close to his past. His cryptic comments hinted at knowledge of events that predated our understanding, but he refused to share details, leaving me wondering if he was a key to the truth or another piece of the puzzle designed to mislead. Meanwhile, my sister began receiving unsettling phone calls, silent, but persistent, as if someone was watching her every move, waiting for her to slip up. It was as if a shadow from the past had reached out to strangle any chance of uncovering the truth. The community that once felt safe now seemed suffocating, with whispers of old grudges, forgotten debts, and buried betrayals resurfacing in every corner. Old family friends started avoiding our calls, and new acquaintances appeared, offering cryptic advice to leave it alone, or walk away while you still can. The atmosphere around us was charged with an unspoken threat, an invisible force working to keep the past, and whatever secrets it held, buried underground. Then came a startling revelation that turned the entire investigation on its head. A long-lost letter surfaced from a distant relative's belongings, one that spoke of a hidden pact made decades ago to protect a secret buried beneath the property. The letter hinted at sacrifices made in silence and a promise that the truth would never see the light of day. This wasn't just a family dispute or a child's frightening experience. It was something far deeper and darker, involving generations and secrets that had festered in the shadows. The more we uncovered, the clearer it became that Lily's story was a small thread in a much larger tapestry of betrayal and hidden agendas. Every new piece of information raised more questions than answers, and I found myself questioning not only the people around me but my own judgment. Was Lily's account real, or had she unknowingly stepped into a world of deception and danger? Were the threats and disappearances attempts to protect her, or were they meant to silence those who sought the truth? The reality was becoming impossible to untangle, and the feeling of being watched, of being hunted, grew stronger with every passing day. As the tension mounted, the mystery took on a life of its own, pulling us deeper into a maze of secrets, lies, and conflicting motives. Trust became a scarce commodity, and every ally could potentially be a foe in disguise. The underground tunnels, the vanished evidence, the cryptic warnings, and the shadowy figures all converged into a storm of uncertainty that threatened to consume us. And just when I thought we might find a moment of clarity, the story twisted again, leaving us with more questions than answers and a chilling realization. The true danger was not just in what had happened to Lily, but in what was still lurking beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. The calm I once clung to shattered in the darkest possible way one cold, late evening when I realized that this mystery had stopped being just a puzzle to solve. It had become a threat that was hunting me, creeping closer with every breath I took. It started with the subtle things, the flicker of movement in the shadows just beyond my window, the sense that someone was watching, the feeling that every step I took was being tracked. At first, I told myself it was paranoia, the natural fear that comes with diving headfirst into a story filled with secrets and dangers. But then the warnings escalated, turning from distant threats into something personal and impossible to ignore. The night I came home to find the door to my house unlocked was the moment everything changed. Inside, nothing was stolen. Nothing was missing except for a single chilling message scrawled across the living room wall in shaky handwriting: "You're next." I sat there frozen, heart pounding like a drum, trying to convince myself it was a cruel joke, but deep down I knew it was a warning, a declaration that I was no longer safe. The house that once felt like a refuge had turned into a cage, a place where shadows whispered and silence screamed louder than ever. The lines between reality and fear blurred as I realized I was tangled in something far more dangerous than a family mystery. Someone wanted me to stop. Someone was willing to go to terrifying lengths to keep the truth buried underground, and now that someone had set their sights on me. That same week, the unthinkable happened. My sister, who had been my rock throughout this nightmare, suddenly disappeared. One day she was there, juggling the chaos of work and motherhood while trying to keep our family together, and the next she was gone without a trace. No calls, no messages, no sign of where she could have gone. It was like she vanished into thin air, swallowed by the same darkness that had taken Lily so briefly and left a scar that no one could heal. The police treated it as a missing person case, but I knew it was something else, something tied to the deeper, darker truths we'd uncovered. The fear that had once been confined to my mind exploded into full-blown panic. Was this a coincidence, or was it a message that I wasn't the only one being silenced? Was my sister the next piece of a terrifying puzzle that someone was trying desperately to hide? Every moment became a battle between holding on to hope and succumbing to despair. I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, jumping at every unexpected sound, and questioning everyone around me. Trust, once a given, had evaporated, replaced by a heavy cloud of suspicion that hung over every interaction. Who could I turn to? Who was friend and who was foe? The people who had once offered comfort now felt like potential threats, their eyes hiding secrets and their smiles masking intentions I couldn't decipher. Even Daniel, the historian who had seemed like an ally, grew distant and evasive, avoiding my calls and disappearing when I needed him most. The loneliness was suffocating, and the weight of the mystery pressed down on me, making every breath feel heavy with dread. In the quiet moments, when the adrenaline faded and the house was still, my mind raced through every possibility, every clue, every shadow of the past that might explain what was happening. But instead of answers, all I found were more questions. Was the he who took Lily and threatened us a single person or part of something bigger? An organization, a family secret so dark it poisoned generations? Was my sister's disappearance connected to the warnings and the vanishing evidence? Or was it a desperate escape from something none of us could face? And perhaps the most terrifying thought of all, was I next in line to vanish into the underground darkness, swallowed by secrets that refused to stay buried? The tension was unbearable, like standing on the edge of a cliff with the wind howling around me and nothing beneath but a bottomless void. The fear was no longer about the unknown outside but the unknown inside, the secrets hidden in the people closest to me, the betrayal that could be waiting behind any door. I felt the weight of every unanswered question pressing against my chest, and the chilling certainty that the story was far from over. The underground tunnels, the vanished maps and journals, the cryptic warnings, they were pieces of a terrifying puzzle that threatened to consume us all. So now, as I share this with you, know this is just the beginning of the descent into a darkness filled with shadows and whispers. The mystery is no longer just a story to solve but a danger to survive. The truth is out there, buried beneath layers of fear and silence, and every step closer only brings more risk. But I have to keep going, not just for Lily, not just for my sister, but for all of us who need to know what lies beneath before it's too late. And with that, the question remains, who is watching? Who is orchestrating this nightmare? And what horrors still lurk in the underground, waiting to be uncovered? Just when the weight of fear and unanswered questions seemed unbearable, and every moment felt like walking deeper into an inescapable trap, the story took a turn so unexpected that it shattered everything I thought I knew. It wasn't a clue I found buried in a dusty box, nor was it a whisper overheard in a quiet hallway. It was a revelation that came from someone I trusted implicitly, someone I believed was on my side from the very beginning. Daniel, the local historian whose knowledge had seemed like a beacon in the darkness, confessed something that flipped the entire mystery upside down and forced me to question not only the events but my own judgment. In a moment heavy with tension and vulnerability, Daniel revealed that much of what we had been chasing, the tunnels, the disappearances, the warnings, was connected to a secret that went far beyond Lily's brief disappearance or my sister's vanishing. He told me there had been deliberate manipulation, that pieces of the story had been crafted and planted to lead us in certain directions while masking a much darker and more complex reality. The underground wasn't just a physical space but a metaphor for something else entirely, something woven into the fabric of our family's history and the community around us. He explained that the figure Lily described, the he who took her underground, might not be a person at all but a carefully constructed symbol used by people who wanted to control the narrative, to keep us distracted while they worked behind the scenes. What struck me most was Daniel's admission that he himself had been involved, knowingly or unknowingly, in spreading misinformation to protect someone, or something, that none of us were prepared to face. The historian who seemed like a guide had been a player in a much larger game, one that involved betrayal, fear, and manipulation on a scale I couldn't have imagined. His hidden agenda wasn't just about uncovering history but about controlling what was revealed and what stayed hidden. Suddenly, the person I had leaned on for support was one of the greatest unknowns in the entire mystery. This revelation threw me into a whirlwind of doubt and paranoia. If Daniel, with all his knowledge and seeming goodwill, was part of this, then who else could be? How many of the people around me had been puppeteers in this shadow play, weaving lies and half-truths to keep us blind? It made me question every interaction, every smile, every word of comfort I had received in recent weeks. The line between friend and foe became impossibly thin, and the safety I once took for granted dissolved into a haze of suspicion. Even more chilling was what Daniel hinted at but refused to fully explain. A hidden force or entity that had been influencing events for decades, using stories like Lily's and my sister's disappearance as distractions, as pawns in a game of power and silence. This entity wasn't just metaphorical or psychological. It had a grip on the community, on our family, on reality itself. The underground was a gateway to that influence, a place where control was exerted in subtle, devastating ways. And we, the ones desperate to uncover the truth, had unknowingly been drawn into its web. As this bombshell settled over me, I realized that the real mystery wasn't about who took Lily or why my sister disappeared. The real question was how deep this deception went, who was pulling the strings, and whether anyone could escape its reach. What felt like a straightforward story of a missing child had morphed into a sprawling labyrinth of secrets, lies, and shadowy power plays that threatened to consume everything we held dear. The twist left me reeling, unsure of where to turn or whom to trust. The familiar faces around me were now masks hiding intentions I couldn't read, and every clue we had gathered suddenly felt suspect. I was no longer just fighting to find Lily or my sister. I was fighting to break free from a conspiracy that had spun its web for years, entangling innocent lives in its grasp. And so, with this new, unsettling truth weighing heavily on my heart, the story moves into uncharted territory, where nothing is as it seems and every revelation only deepens the mystery. The underground still calls, but now it is a symbol of the darkness that surrounds us all, a darkness that refuses to be buried no matter how deep we dig. The moment Daniel's confession settled in my mind like a stone, the fragile thread of trust I'd been clinging to snapped completely, leaving me stranded in a place where every choice felt like a knife's edge. I was suddenly forced to confront not just the mystery surrounding Lily and my sister but the reality that someone I had once considered an ally might have been part of the problem all along. The weight of that truth crushed me, but what came next was even harder, because Daniel wasn't just a distant figure anymore. He was someone I had to face, someone I needed answers from, and the confrontation was nothing like I expected. It was raw and electric, filled with accusations that cut deep, and a desperate need to understand why he had chosen secrecy over honesty. The room felt suffocating as I stared into eyes that once held comfort and now held something unreadable, guilt, fear, or maybe something darker. The line between friend and enemy blurred completely in that moment, and I realized I was standing on the precipice of a choice that could change everything. Do I demand the whole truth, risking the unraveling of relationships that kept me grounded, or do I let some secret stay buried to protect what little peace remains? Before I could process that, the tension ratcheted up even further with a message so direct and chilling that it stopped me cold. A choice laid bare in black and white, an ultimatum that forced me to weigh my own safety against the relentless pursuit of truth. The message was clear: stop digging or those I cared about would pay the price. There was no room for negotiation or delay. I was told that if I continued to chase answers, I would be putting myself and my family in danger that could no longer be contained or controlled. It was a cruel paradox. The truth I so desperately sought now threatened to destroy the very people I was trying to protect. The emotional turmoil was suffocating, twisting through my thoughts like a relentless storm. Could I bear to sacrifice the truth for safety? Or was the cost of silence even worse? I found myself torn, battling with fears that clawed at my sanity every waking moment. The idea of hiding, pretending nothing was wrong, felt like betrayal, not just to Lily and my sister but to myself. Yet the warnings were not idle threats. I felt the eyes watching me everywhere, in the streets, through windows, in the quiet phone calls that ended before a word was spoken. Every step outside was a gamble, every interaction shadowed by doubt. My relationships grew strained, with loved ones pushing me to stop, to walk away from the darkness that seemed to consume us all. But how could I? How could I turn my back when answers hung just out of reach, when the stakes were so painfully high? The emotional weight pressed down on me, leaving me exhausted and raw, caught between fear and determination. What made it even more unbearable was the suspicion creeping into my heart. Was someone close to me the one orchestrating these threats? Was there betrayal within my own circle, a hidden agenda I hadn't yet uncovered? The thought sliced through me with cold precision. Trust became a luxury I could no longer afford. Each conversation was a test, every glance a question. Even those who had stood by me began to seem like strangers, their motives clouded by the shadows that had settled over our lives. The uncertainty gnawed away at the foundation of my reality, making it harder to distinguish friend from foe, truth from deception. Despite the pressure, despite the fear, the resolve to uncover the truth burned brighter than ever. But now, the path forward was fraught with impossible decisions and painful sacrifices. The conflict was no longer just external, it was internal, a battle between self-preservation and the relentless quest for answers. And as I faced this crossroads, I knew that whatever choice I made next would ripple through every part of my life, shaping not only the outcome of this mystery but the very essence of who I was. The moment the full scope of the conspiracy began to unfold, it hit me like a tidal wave, dragging me deeper into a whirlpool of lies and danger that I could no longer escape. What started as a search for answers about Lily and my sister had exploded into something far bigger, something that stretched beyond my family, beyond our town, and reached into places I never expected. The web of deception was vast, woven by people who had carefully orchestrated events to keep a secret buried so deep that the consequences of its exposure would shake not just my world but the very foundation of the community itself. I had believed I was fighting alone, but I was wrong. There were more players in this twisted game than I could have imagined, and their reach was long and ruthless. Just as I began to grasp the magnitude of it all, the most devastating blow came from someone I had trusted without question. Someone whose presence had been a constant through every moment of fear and doubt. They revealed their true colors in the most shocking way, turning the knife deeper into my heart. It wasn't just betrayal, it was a calculated act that shattered the fragile alliances I had built. The person I thought was my closest ally had been working against me from the start, feeding information to those who wanted to keep the conspiracy intact, silencing voices like mine that dared to ask questions. The realization left me breathless and betrayed, and the weight of their deceit threatened to crush my resolve. How could someone so close be part of the darkness I was fighting? The urgency of the situation escalated beyond anything I'd faced before. I was no longer just seeking truth, I was fighting for survival, racing against a clock that ticked louder with every passing second. The threats became more explicit, the danger more immediate, and the pressure to expose the conspiracy before it consumed everything unbearable. It wasn't just about protecting my family anymore, it was about unraveling a system built on lies, manipulation, and fear that could destroy countless lives if left unchecked. As I navigated this high-stakes nightmare, every moment felt like walking on a razor's edge. The people I encountered were a mix of allies and enemies, their motives cloaked in shadows that kept me guessing. Trust was scarce, and every decision carried heavy consequences. The lines between right and wrong blurred as I faced impossible choices, knowing that any misstep could cost me everything. The emotional turmoil was intense, fueled by anger, fear, and an unrelenting determination to break free from the web of deceit. The tension reached a fever pitch when I uncovered evidence that connected this conspiracy to powerful figures beyond our town, individuals who had the means and the will to bury the truth indefinitely. This revelation made it clear that the underground tunnels, the vanished evidence, and the threats were part of a much larger effort to control and silence. The fight wasn't just mine, it was part of a larger battle against a system designed to protect the few at the expense of the many. In the midst of this chaos, I realized that the story I thought I was telling was only the beginning. The stakes were higher than I ever imagined, and the dangers more real than I could have prepared for. Every step I took brought me closer to a truth that could change everything, but also closer to those who would stop at nothing to keep it hidden. The pressure was relentless, the clock was ticking, and the choice to keep fighting carried risks that could no longer be ignored. As this nightmare unfolds, the question remains, how much am I willing to sacrifice to bring the truth to light? And how far will those who want to keep the conspiracy hidden go to stop me? Everything came crashing together on a night that felt too quiet, like the air itself was bracing for impact. The storm outside wasn't just weather, it was the tension that had been building for weeks, now ready to rip everything apart. I had followed every lead, traced every lie, uncovered every hidden thread that tied this conspiracy together. And now, at the edge of it all, I was standing face to face with the truth, inside the very place where the nightmare had started. The old house, its foundation rotting, its walls stained with secrets too heavy to hold. The tunnels were real. They weren't just whispers passed around in late-night conversations or sketches in a lost journal. They were beneath us the entire time, a physical and symbolic network of control, of silence, of fear. And down there, waiting in the shadows, was the one person I never imagined I'd have to confront. It wasn't Daniel. It wasn't some nameless figure hiding in the dark. It was my own uncle, my father's brother, who had stood at every family gathering with a warm smile and kind words, who had held Lily in his arms just days before she vanished. He wasn't just part of the conspiracy. He was the architect of it. I found him deep in the tunnels, standing by a rusted door built into the rock, behind which generations of silence had been stored like artifacts in a forgotten museum. The look in his eyes wasn't rage. It was something colder, calculated, controlled, like a man who had made peace with his sins a long time ago. He spoke slowly, his voice echoing against the damp walls, and with each word, the full weight of what he had done, and why, sank in. He hadn't just orchestrated the misinformation and threats. He had manipulated the entire narrative from the beginning, using his knowledge of our family's darkest history to keep everyone in check. The underground network had once been used during Prohibition, but when that era ended, something far more sinister took its place. It became a system to store secrets, to hide scandals, to control people through fear and blackmail. Over decades, It morphed into something even uglier, used to silence whistleblowers, bury crimes, and erase the people who got too close. My uncle had inherited that system like a twisted family heirloom, one he guarded fiercely under the guise of protecting the family. He never meant for Lily to be hurt. He said that as if it was supposed to make things better. She'd wandered too close to something she shouldn't have, and he panicked. What happened next, he claimed, was containment. As he confessed, something inside me shattered, not just because of what he'd done but because of what it meant. Every memory I had of him became stained with this truth, every laugh, every gesture suddenly recast in the cold light of betrayal. He'd made me doubt my own instincts, gaslight me into silence, and used our family bond as both shield and weapon. The psychological toll hit hard, but this wasn't over yet. He offered me a choice: walk away, pretend none of it ever happened, and he would make the threats stop. He'd make my sister come back unharmed. He said it like a deal, like a reasonable solution to all this chaos. But I saw it for what it was: one final manipulation. A last-ditch attempt to pull me into the silence he had spent his life curating. The standoff wasn't physical, but the tension in that underground chamber was suffocating. I was shaking, not just from fear but from fury, betrayal, and the relentless need to make this right. I told him I'd rather burn everything down than be part of his silence. And that's when the real twist hit, one he didn't expect either. Behind us, from the far end of the tunnel, came the sound of footsteps. And then another voice, trembling but strong: my sister. She hadn't been taken. She hadn't disappeared. She'd gone underground herself, following clues I hadn't seen, gathering her own evidence, hiding in the shadows and waiting for the moment to expose everything. She'd been watching, recording, building a case. She stepped out of the darkness holding the same camera I had once used to try to document the mystery, now filled with footage that proved everything. My uncle's expression finally cracked. For the first time I saw fear in his eyes, not of punishment but of exposure. He wasn't afraid to be arrested. He was afraid of losing control. My sister didn't say a word. She just handed me the camera, and in that moment we both knew there was no going back. The truth was finally in our hands, and the silence that had ruled our lives was about to be broken. But just as we turned to leave, as the tension began to loosen and daylight felt closer than ever, the tunnel behind us shifted with a deep, groaning rumble. Something had been triggered, maybe deliberately, maybe not, and part of the passage began to collapse. Dust filled the air, stone cracked and split, and the exit we came through vanished under a wall of rubble. The truth was finally exposed, but now we were trapped underground with the very man we'd come to confront. And whether that was part of his final plan, or just the house taking one last breath, we didn't yet know. And that's where everything hangs now, between light and dark, truth and silence, justice and survival. We have the truth. But the question that remains, the one I need you to ask yourself, is this: now that we finally know what really happened, will we ever get out to tell the world? We didn't think we'd make it out. Not with the tunnels caving in behind us, not with the years of silence fighting so hard to hold us down. The air grew thinner the deeper we tried to move, the weight of everything, stone, dirt, history, pressing on us like it wanted to bury the truth with us. But survival has a strange way of showing up when you least expect it. Somewhere in the maze of tunnels, beyond the broken beams and echoes of whispered warnings, there was a passage my sister had found, a hidden exit sealed off decades ago but still intact enough for us to squeeze through. We clawed our way out, bleeding, coughing, holding that camera like it was the only thing tethering us to the surface. And when we finally broke into open air, when the cold night wrapped around us like a second skin, I realized something. We weren't running anymore. We were exposing it. The truth didn't belong to the shadows. It never did. We handed the footage over to the one journalist we knew wouldn't look away, the kind of investigator who had lost everything before chasing the wrong lead, someone who still believed in justice even when the system didn't. And once the story hit the internet, once the keywords underground tunnels, missing girl case reopened, family conspiracy caught on camera, and generational silence exposed, started trending on YouTube and Twitter and TikTok, the silence cracked. Not all at once, not in some sweeping moment of justice. But cracks appeared where none had been before. The town could no longer pretend. The house was condemned. The property cordoned off. Investigators descended like vultures on the tunnels. And what they found inside didn't just confirm everything we had said, it went deeper. Names were named. Documents were uncovered. Faces we thought were victims turned out to be accomplices. People we'd grown up trusting were let out in cuffs, staring at the ground like it might open up and swallow them whole. But here's the part that still keeps me up at night, long after the camera stopped rolling and the news cycle moved on. Some of them disappeared. Not escaped, disappeared star. Just like Lily once had. As if the conspiracy, though wounded, still had enough reach to silence a few voices before going down. That's the thing about secrets that live underground, they don't always die easy. Even with evidence, even with arrests, there's this unsettling sense that something was left behind. A blueprint. A backup plan. Something waiting for the right conditions to rise again. And I can't help but wonder if one day, some other family will find themselves standing in our shoes, peering into a place that was supposed to stay buried, only to find the echoes still alive. As for my sister, she never returned to that town. She moved across the country, changed her name, started over. She says she sleeps better now, but I know she still checks the locks twice. I stayed at least for a while. Long enough to testify, long enough to make sure the files didn't mysteriously vanish, long enough to stare down the people who once smiled at me while hiding monsters in their basements. But eventually I left too. The house still stands, boarded up, fenced off, but you can feel it watching. Locals whisper about it, that viral haunted tunnel house, the place from the missing girl YouTube story, real-life true crime mystery. Teenagers dare each other to sneak in. Content creators post clickbait walkthroughs. No one gets too close. They all sense what we learned the hard way. Some ghosts aren't looking to be freed, they're waiting to replace you. And Lily, she came back, but she was never the same. She remembered pieces, whispers, cold stone walls, the echo of her own voice. She asks questions now, things no child should ever have to wonder. But she's healing in her own way. Drawing again. Laughing sometimes. She sleeps with the light on. And every now and then she says something that stops me cold, like she's repeating something someone once told her in the dark. I write those things down. Not because I want to remember, but because I know someday I'll need to. So that's where it ends, at least for now. With the truth exposed, the conspiracy cracked, and the survivors scattered across new lives that still carry the scars. But if you're watching this, if you're one of the millions who clicked because you saw a real story behind viral underground case, or family secrets finally revealed, don't just scroll past. Ask yourself, how well do you really know the people closest to you? How deep do your family roots go, and what might be buried under them? Because if I've learned anything, it's this. Sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. Sometimes it digs its way back up, and waits.